This is Chapter 3, Communication Principles for Group Members. Much of what is covered in this chapter you should recognize. It is mostly a review of several chapters from the interpersonal communication course that you've all had. I will try to highlight some things that are particularly important or have a different twist when we're talking about group communication. And then I'm going to refer you to some videos that will demonstrate examples of the principles that are discussed here. What this chapter basically covers is communication characteristics, listening styles, and the relationship between communication and technology. If we look first at communication characteristics, most of these terms, as I have said, you've heard before. But let's look at a few characteristics of communication that are new to group communication. Do you ever think about the idea that when you're in a meeting or working on a group project or in a class, that everyone in the group, including yourself, is responsible for making sure that communication is effective? I think most of the time we feel that the teacher, the manager, or the project leader is the one who is responsible for making sure that communication in the group is effective. But if we truly understand and believe that communication is both personal and transactional, then we have to recognize that teachers, managers, and project leaders have developed and are in the process of developing their own personal and changing understandings of the activities that are going on in that group, just like you are. In fact, most leaders of groups have a lot more ideas about the group activities than the other group members have. Their commitment is typically greater. They may feel that they have more at stake if the project goes badly. A lot of them have a lot more experience with the issues facing the group. And they may have a lot of relationships with people outside the group, like their boss, that are affecting their thoughts and actions while they're in the group. These are some of the very reasons why a person might be selected or appointed to be a group leader. But these strong feelings, these varied relationships, and these strong ideas are also the very things that might make it hard for other group members to relate to the group leader. One of my favorite quotes is from Jeffrey Bellman, who wrote The Beauty of the Beast, Breathing New Life into Organizations. He says, when you start working at an organization, you're walking into someone else's dream. Each organization started off as someone's dream, an idea in someone's mind. Now in you come, all full of energy and all full of your own ideas, ready to change the world and someone's dream. That's hard for some leaders to take. So keeping that in mind might help you realize that group communication is hard, and it's not always the leader's responsibility to make sure that it's completely effective. It's everyone's responsibility. Another critical aspect of group communication is listening. And in COM 215, you were asked to think about your own listening preferences, so that part of the chapter should feel like a review to you. But one thing that I think really impacts group work is poor listening in group situations. Isn't it a lot easier to be a poor listener in a group setting rather than a one-on-one setting? In a group, we sometimes feel that we can hide why others are engaging in interaction. We can check our email, text messages, and before we know it, we've missed the past several minutes of interactions that might have been important to the group. So let's watch a short video showing some common poor listening habits that develop in small groups.
Lynn, you've made proposals to the administration before. You know what they want. Any ideas on how we should approach them?
Yes, Brad, I've been thinking about this a lot. What the university will be most concerned with is costs. They'll want to know about operational expenses. They'll want to know what the initial outlay will be. I think they'll also be concerned with state and federal licensing requirements for daycare.
Mm-hmm.
We'll need to get our facts absolutely straight. I think we should go to the library and check into this and research it as much as we possibly can. Check into licensing requirements. Take a look at universities across the country that operate daycare centers and what their typical costs are. I think we should also visit 2 or 3 universities within our state to see what their operations are like. I think we can learn a lot from that.
Yeah.
Michael, what do you think?
I'm sorry, Lynn. I was a million miles away. Run that by me again, would you?
Jeez, Michael, I was just saying that the administration will be concerned about costs. Do you think we should visit a couple of universities?
Oh, that reminds me. I was at Central University last weekend because my boyfriend goes there. And they had the best homecoming parade that I had ever seen. I mean, every single student organization was involved in that parade. They blocked off streets.
And I thought Michael was bad. What does a parade have to do with getting ourselves organized about daycare?
Well, nothing. I was just contrasting their school pride with ours. Well, I think we could learn a lot from them.
I agree. Our homecoming really needs improvement. It's completely dead. That's something I'd like to work on.
Oh, that's something you'd like to work on. Look, I know that this probably isn't your top priority, Michael, but I can assure you that to older students like myself, daycare is a very important issue.
That's not what I meant.
I know that it's not as interesting or as much fun as homecoming, but a daycare center is going to improve the lives of students a lot more than making homecoming fun.
Whoa, hold on. Now, we are all guilty of digressing, but it doesn't mean that we don't care. Now, the idea of a daycare center was heavily promoted last year during student government, and the 3 of us were vocal supporters of the idea. Now, we haven't done a good job of listening here, but we do care, and we are committed, right?
Yeah.
We really are.
I know, I'm sorry. It's just that I'm pulled in so many different directions. A daycare center would really help non-traditional students like myself.
I know. We'll get it done.
We'll do it.
We will.
Okay, now let's go back to thinking about listening again. So we just saw some examples of poor listening, and so practicing active listening in a group setting is really important, so that we don't become too distracted. Now let's look at another video and see some active listening strategies, effectively working.
Okay. Lynn, what were you saying about approaching the administration?
Well, as I said, I think money is always the main issue for the administration. We'll need to show that we can operate a cost-effective daycare center here on campus. We should gather as much data as we can from universities that do operate successful daycare centers.
So are you saying that we need to show that the center will pay for itself and that we can model our daycare after other places that do cover all costs?
No, that's not it exactly. I don't think we'll ever be able to cover all the direct costs. I do think, however, that the daycare center can generate a substantial income. And then if we add to that the savings that we'll have from students who are able to stay in school because of the center, I think we can show the administration that we can run a successful, cost-effective daycare center.
Okay, well, let me try this again then. Are you saying that we need to show exactly how much money the daycare will bring in and how much it will generate as a result of students who don't drop out or who can take more hours? And I think you even mentioned that other universities have successfully done this. So we can use them to show the administration that we can do it here also. Is that right?
That's it exactly. I'm just sure the biggest objection to the administration will be the money.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, now we've looked at some of the characteristics of communication in small groups, and we've looked at some of the ideas about listening in small groups and pointed out some ways that it's a little bit different than when you're in one-on-one situations. Now let's look again at the relationship between communication and technology. In almost every chapter, we will look at this relationship and see how it affects a small group. You'll probably use some of these means of communicating with your group members in this course about your group project. And many of you probably already use them in your work situations. Some of you have mentioned this in your discussion forums in the past. So discuss with your group members what forms of communication might work for your group in relationship to your group project. Those of you who are familiar with some of this technology, share your knowledge with others in the group, but be patient with those who aren't as familiar as you are with these tools, because they're going to be a little bit anxious about using them. If you're someone who's not that familiar with some of these forms of technology, try to keep an open mind and think about using this as an opportunity to get more familiar with some of these aspects of technology in an environment where you have friends that you can talk to and you have a lot of help around you. So in the future, you can be one of the people who are comfortable and familiar with using computer-mediated communication. Now, when we think about computer-mediated communication, we need to think about how this affects the characteristics that we talked about related to communication. So no matter if we are face-to-face or using some form of mediated communication, we still have to be aware that when we're communicating, we're using symbols, and those symbols can mean different things to different people. For instance, I still have to ask my teenager at times to explain some of the shorthand text messages I get from other people. At first, I think the person has misspelled something because I can't figure out what the message says. And once you know the symbol, though, what it stands for, the message becomes clearer. And no matter what form of communication we use, there are still relationships involved. There are relationships with the person we're communicating with and relationships around us that impact our conversation with that person, like our family members, our supervisors, and our friends. That doesn't change just because we are using some form of mediated communication. This sort of reminds me of my tennis team I belonged to a few years ago. There were about 8 of us on the team and a coach. One of my friends on the team, we'll call her Diane, frequently shared with me some things another team member, we'll call her Maria, often said to her. Diane would oftentimes be frustrated and say she didn't understand why Maria said the things she did. These messages were often text messages. But I understood because I knew that Maria was having an extramarital relationship with our coach. Tennis drama, I know. I hated it, and I finally quit the team because of it. But what I said to Diane was, you have to understand, whenever you're talking to Maria, you're also talking to our coach. Maria can't talk to you simply as a teammate because she's always worried about her relationship with our coach and keeping that relationship a secret. She's always guarded in her talk, and that's why you can't figure out why she's saying some of the things that she says or texting some of the things that she is texting. So when we think about group communication, we have to think about the characteristics of communication, how important listening is, and the relationship between that communication and the technology we're using. So communication in small group settings has the same characteristics as interpersonal communication, but since there are more people involved, there is a lot more potential for misunderstandings. There's more chances for symbols to have different meanings to different people. There's more relationships involved that influence what people do and say. There's more schedules to manage, more personalities to manage. But there's also more knowledge, more ideas, more chances for friendship and learning. Listening can be more of a challenge with a group because you can hide in the crowd if you want to. And so engaging in active listening is really key. And as technology becomes more and more a part of how we do business and how we communicate with everyone in our lives, using technology in a group setting allows more people to stay in touch more easily. But it also means that there are more ways for information to get misinterpreted. And typically, there's higher expectations that communication will be quick.